Okay, thanks everybody. Thank you, Andres, for the music to help welcome everybody in here, and welcome everyone to today's NASED webinar with You Facilitate. Today's webinar is called Facilitation Capacity Building, a Tool for Inclusive Community Development. So today you will be hearing from a distinguished panel making up a multi-sector team that worked together in Fairfax County, Virginia, as part of a collective impact initiative. Andres Marquez Lara, You Facilitate CEO and NASED Annual Conference keynote speaker, by the way, will moderate this panel. And our panelists today will tell the story of how developing the facilitation abilities of community leaders has led to the success and sustainability of their community development work. It's truly going to be storytelling. We're not relying on PowerPoint today, so get ready. And my name is Laura DiMaria, and I'm the Executive Director of NASED, which is the National Association for County Community and Economic Development. And we are proud to host this webinar and very grateful that you're with us today. So NASED's annual conference, which I just mentioned, where Andres will be giving a broader presentation, is literally 1 month away. So it's very soon. It's going to be in Salt Lake County, Utah, and you can learn more and register by visiting nased.org, and I'll share some information in the chat as well. So NASED is a national organization representing counties and cities' affordable housing and community development programs. Membership in NASED gains you access to our professional staff in Washington, D.C., discounts on trainings and events, and a network of members across the country engaged in community development and housing work. So I will share more information, like I said, both about the conference and joining our organization in the chat, as well as my email address if you would like to learn more. One more thing also, when our webinar concludes today, you'll be prompted to take a survey. If you would take a moment to take that, please, and provide us a little bit of feedback on the content today, as well as let us know if you'd like more information either about You Facilitate or NASED. So lastly, today's webinar is being recorded, and you may use the chat to ask questions at any time. And without further ado, I will now turn it over to Andres.
Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate it. So yes, hi everybody. My name is Andres Marquez Lara. I'm originally from Caracas, Venezuela, but I've been in the US for a long time. And I'm the CEO of You Facilitate, and really excited here to bring this awesome panel to share a story with you. In today's panel, I'm going to kind of bring them, and if it was in real life, we bring them to the stage one by one. So on Zoom, we're going to spotlight them one by one. So we're going to bring Yolanda, who is the Executive Director of Lazara. She was a foundational community member working at the time with UC that actually brought us in to be able to work with You Facilitate. We then also have Lisa Washington, and she is a community member and also a co-chair for the working group for one of these initiatives. So we're going to be hearing from her as well. We also have in this awesome panel, Alicia Blackwell, who is representing the Fairfax County government. She is the Deputy Director of Family Services at Fairfax County, and we'll be kind of giving that perspective. We also have Ivana Escobar, who is representing United Community, which was the original backbone organization of this initiative, and really kind of has supported and sustained that initiative, and really kind of oversaw our work there in the beginning. And then, of course, last but not least, we have Nate Stevens, who is the You Facilitate trainer, who actually spent the time doing the capacity building in the community. And of course, myself, I'm going to be moderating today's panel. So you should have this full panel in front of you. If this is the stage, again, we'd all be there. And even though it may feel like, oh my God, I've been to panels before, when there are 3 people, it's long, 6 people, are you kidding me? It won't be that way. I mean, you can think of us basically, part of my background is improv theater. And in improv, there's a game called like the 3-headed being, where you kind of have one being with 3 different heads. Well, we're like a 6-headed being. Like we're telling one story, but from various different perspectives. And, I want us to really kind of, so think of this as a story, our story. And it's a story that, by the way, is still taking place. It was years in the making. It's still happening. There's like one snapshot in time. It's a story about alternative spaces, the kind of spaces that really put community front and center, that really transform power, how power is shared with communities. And basically a story to kind of share what was the impact of that? What did it take to kind of share that power in new ways? And we're going to say, and I'm going to expand on this in the keynote next month, that one of the secret sauces, one of the ways that was actually accomplished was through facilitation. Facilitation being kind of a really powerful skill to really create new spaces of connection and collaboration in community initiatives like the one that took place and that is still going on. So with that said, I'm going to be moderating, and I'm just going to quickly turn it over to Yolanda, because I would love for Yolanda to kick us off by tell us about how this project began. What was the intentionality of how we brought people together, and why you brought them together? And then as we're telling the story, you'll notice we were doing the run through earlier this week or last week, and I basically did it it's almost like they were just picking up on each other. So I may not have to intervene that much, but the idea is we really want to kind of tell a story and flow. We'll do that for about maybe half an hour or so. Then we'll pause for your questions. But of course, at any time you have questions, just put them in the chat. And when we get to a Q&A, we'll get to answer them. So Yolanda, how did this start?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share the story of my wonderful community. So the community that we're talking about is the community I have resided in for over 16 years. This began, I was working at United Community. I was working in a community center, and I became what in the Black community is like the community mom, the community auntie. And so because of that, this community trust was graced upon me and blessed upon me by my community members. And so when United Community wanted to do a community-led effort, because I had been at the table really growing a community center, it was almost natural for me to come to the table to help inform how do we get community members to come to the table and to engage them, and how do we make sure that we're setting this up in a way that overrides the distrust that is already in communities. As you all know, because of years of distrust with the system and marginalized communities, often community members are like, nah, I'm not sure, when you're asking them to lead something. So what we did was we learned the importance of having that community trust and that lived experience leading and guiding this community change. As I was at the table and preparing the table, I realized that my background with United Community is I also was an ambassador for this collective impact initiative that had began over I guess 13 years ago, called Opportunity Neighborhood. And so that was my first step into United Community as an ambassador, which is what Lisa Washington is. And so as an ambassador, I learned how to engage with stakeholders, how to engage with county members. And when I got to the place where I was leading this effort, I understood the importance of having training so that I can have confidence and knowledge on how to do what I was going to be graced as a community member to do. So as a side gig, I guess, for lack of better words, me and Andres met years ago at a conference where I was teaching conflict resolution in Baltimore, Maryland. We used the art of dance. And so, as he said, improv, we're improv siblings. And so years ago, he and I met, and I had been doing a lot of facilitating, and he and I have been keeping up. And so when he told me about Youth Facilitate and what they were doing, I was like, hey, I have this initiative, and I really feel like the way that You Facilitate teaches how to facilitate in this very holistic, human-centered manner would be great as an introduction to community members who may not trust this new table, because usually tables are prepared for us, and we were actually asking community members to actually help prepare the table. So I brought two trainings to prepare the table. One was allyship training to make sure people understood how to address the white supremacy and white dominance culture that sometimes shows up in these spaces and make people feel marginalized and not invited. And so we had that, but more than that was this Youth Facilitate training. And that helped community members get coached and receive that confidence on how to advocate for themselves and bring their lived experience to the table to create outcomes, to plan, to establish new policies, practices. I'll tell a real quick story. I remember very early on in the training, we had a community member that was attending a housing meeting, and they were started doing this like voting, and they had given community members voting rights, but they had not made it bilingual. So Spanish speaking community members who had voting rights was not understanding completely, like they understood, but at the level that they needed to, there needed to be Spanish translation provided. And so the community member who had attended this actually paused the meeting and said, wait, we are not voting because we don't really understand. And when you're talking about voting with housing, there's vernacular, there's terminology that needs to be translated. You can't just say one word. To translate it into another language means that it may take 5 or 6 words to say one word that we understand in the English language. So the beautiful thing is, because of that, the meeting was canceled, rescheduled, and an apology was issued to the community from both supervisors and the government official who was heading up that meeting. And so I think that that is completely what we're talking about in sharing power. So they were all at the table, but you can't give power without making sure that you're sharing resources and sharing knowledge. And that is what we're doing.
Thanks, Yolanda. And I think that's a great segue to maybe bring Alicia in a little bit from the county perspective, because again, sharing power, I'm sure, can be challenging for organizations perhaps that are not used to working in particular ways. Because if we want to be inclusive, it means changing how we use power and those institutions in power, how we are able to give up power for others, right? So I would love for your take on, how do you see the sharing of power in the community as you're treated as partners in this project? What has been your experience from the county perspective?
Yeah, so thanks so much, Andreas, and I appreciate everyone joining us this afternoon. From the county perspective, you'll hear me say this a lot in the comments that I make, that partners share power, and the sharing of power builds trust. Power is tangible. It's something that we hold on to, particularly in government, because we are used to being the rule makers. We're used to kind of being the ones that decide policies, that analyze research or data and generate, kind of a list of things that we think communities need to do in order to be kind of thriving. And this work has been transformative and different for me, and a little bit different for many of my government partners out there, because this is really an exercise in sharing power. And it means that you don't come to the table with just the latest research, with just the latest trends. You come to the table kind of armed with that in a formal way, but you also come to the table ready to hear from those with lived experience and to hear what is important to them. Sometimes in the formalities of government and in the bureaucracy, we can get lost in the policy making and what we think should happen versus listening to the voices of those that are actually living in the communities and what their experiences are. So sharing that power can be a real challenge when you're used to being the one who kind of comes to the table with the solutions and with the rules. And so I think that this is directly related to equity work. So I know many governments out there, probably have equity strategic plans or goals focused on equity that they're kind of hoping to reach. And without truly including community partners in a meaningful and tangible way, there's no real way to kind of, do equitable work. And so that can be shown in a number of ways. It's not just the participation and hearing of the voice. It's also consideration for compensation. For bringing community partners to the table and compensating them for their time, for their input, for sharing their experiences. As we were preparing for this webinar, I kind of analogize this to, as government officials, we don't come to the table for free, right? Like we're employed somewhere. I know every 2 weeks, something magic happens with my bank account and money appears, right? I'm being compensated for what I bring to the table, and in true partnership and in true reflection of value, we're bringing kind of compensation for those who are bringing their experiences and their contributions for the table as well. So that's one way to reflect equity. I think the other kind of lesson that I've learned is that truly incorporating the voice of folks that live in the communities is vital, and not sidelining their comments, their experiences, and really bringing punctuation and value to that. I think the other piece too is just really slowing down a little bit. And I know in government, right, it's what's the deliverable, what's the project plan, how can we, kind of strategize this out for 2 years and get to the end goal. What I've learned so far in my experience is that because we're working with humans and we're working with human needs, they're not always predictable. And so I think from the government perspective, we have to realize that while having a project plan as a framework is important, you have to give space and opportunity for the unpredictable in this too. And that could mean, understanding what resources are needed to adequately facilitate conversation. And Facilitate has been a great partner to us in helping us kind of make sure that everyone is heard when we do come together and do planning activities. And sometimes making sure that everyone is heard takes time. And so we're looking more for accuracy and value and commitment than we are speed. And so I think that's something else that governments have to consider. And lastly, I'll just say that trust is so important. And it's difficult to build trust without relationship. And it's difficult to build relationship without, kind of repeating trustworthy behavior over time. And so I think in order for us to build relationship, it is something that has taken us years. I know Yolanda started out, I think, working with us just after the onset of the pandemic, which was when I also started working at Fairfax as well. And so a lot of the work that she did around preparing the table was trust building. It was bringing key players to the table to build relationship with very intentional exercises and opportunities to dialogue. And so all of these pieces are interrelated just around trust, meaningful opportunity to contribute in relationship building, and knowing that this is not something that happens overnight. The harm to our communities did not happen overnight. So we have to understand that the mistrust takes time to undo, and it's a continual and kind of integrative process. So I'll stop there, Andreas, and let others chime in.
Thanks, Alicia. I love it. And I think in many ways, what you're saying reminded me, like, as I've been preparing for the keynote, I've been interviewing different NASED members. And I remember in some conversations, some counties saying, hey, we're having a hard time getting people to these meetings where we were kind of advertising, we're trying to get people there, but they're just not showing up. Now, some counties are able to, but not others. And, as you're sharing this component, and Yolanda, like, I think it's sometimes just putting an ad saying, hey, we're having a meeting is not enough, right? You have to build the relationships, to your point. You got to have the consistency. They have to trust you that their voice will actually be meaningfully heard, and it just won't be a checkbox so we can then move on to do something else. And that takes time. There's a wonderful quote that it's been attributed to an African proverb. I actually don't know where it came from, but it's, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Going together is messier. It's more complex. You take 3 steps forward, you take 1 step backwards. And oftentimes in our, white supremacy culture, perfectionist and trying to get things right, we don't make room for just the messiness of the human interactions. And I think that's the consistency that we, as in these coalitions, need to have that far side to be able to kind of go there. Now, at this moment, I actually would love to bring Lisa into the conversation. Lisa, because you were at the heart of this. I mean, you saw it from the ground up, you've been participating in it, you're still participating in it. And I would love to kind of get your perspective in particular about what was your experience of power before and after the training, and how did the training support you in the work that you're doing today? And you're on mute, Lisa, sorry.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, we can hear you.
Hear me? Okay. I'd like to start out by saying I want to thank Nate. He's the one that was my facilitator. And I looked forward to going to all of his classes. I never missed one. He played games. He really got me to open up. He just brought a lot. He brought the best in me. I was doing hospice work for like 15 years. After going through Nate's classes, I was an ambassador I still am an ambassador, but after Nate's classes, I resigned from hospice, and I wanted to do ambassador full time. So, which was a great experience. I love doing the work that I do. And I actually can relate to the community. I mean, I've been homeless. I've just been without food, you name it, I've been through it. So I like to give my love to the community. I love doing what I do. Ivana has me growing. So I love y'all, you facilitators, because it started with Nate to help me grow. It was just like a healing for me. Like, you know, like he just made me look at things in a different way. So I enjoy what I do, and I want to thank Nate again. And I love being a part of this community. I still have some anxiety with talking to people, but Ivana's working with me, and I'm opening up. And thank you guys for letting me be a part of your team.
Well, and the anxiety is you're speaking to like 30 people here, so that's not coming across. So no worries there. Lisa, I'm wondering if I can ask maybe one more question in terms of like, can you share a story about maybe like in the community about, you know, an intervention or something that you did that you felt perhaps was inspired by the work you did with Nate and Ivana in some of these trainings? I think you remember when we were talking before, it was about like, you know, what can your office do for us? Like there was an event where you actually were able to speak up in a situation where perhaps you hadn't spoken up before. If you could maybe bring us to that moment and what was going through your mind and what, if you could maybe bring us there.
Yes, I am. After I'm able to speak up, like neighbors, and actually talk to them, and they'll tell me what they need assistance with. I've been able to help at the food bank. I've been able to help people get different resources. English and Spanish. I even grew. I've been able to use my phone if if I couldn't understand them. So, and even with that communication, I was able to get things done that they needed. Some people needed food. They've been going to the food bank. Some people needed resources for their utilities being cut off. So I was able to refer them to UCM. So that's how I've grown. Like people need things. I talk to people now, and I give them the resources because of you guys. That's how we can help people out in the community.
Thank you, Lisa. And I think, you know, both in the story that Yolanda shared and the one Lisa's sharing, you notice there's always the theme of trust and confidence in themselves, right? The idea of empowerment where people are able to then believe in themselves to take action and see the impact of that. That's something that I feel, you know, able to speak up in meetings, perhaps where otherwise they wouldn't have, be able to talk to their peers and colleagues and neighbors and say, hey, check this out. And then lo and behold, they actually listen to them later on. You find themselves getting help in the community. At this point, I would like to invite Ivana. Ivana, I would love maybe for you to give us, what are other community members saying, or what have you seen with a wider lens? You know, from UC's perspective, you're working with communities as well. You're hearing a lot of these stories. Maybe you can share with us some of these the impact of this that you've seen firsthand.
Yeah, well, thank you again also for having me here. And I'll say that one of the things that we do see when our community members go through a youth facilitate training is that they feel more comfortable talking to county folks as well as the community. A lot of the times we see that people don't understand what happens in the background. So when we come to meetings, they don't understand how people plan an agenda, as well as how do we do a debrief. And when they go through the youth facilitate training, we do see that community members feel more empowered of, I know why I'm here and I know why we have a meeting. So we've had community members say, what is the point of this meeting again? Because they'll see that the conversation is going left while the focus of the meeting was, you know, like for why we are here today. And I will add that I loved hearing Lisa talk about her examples, but I was going to add that Lisa, I don't know if you remember, the Sequoia Resource Fair, I pushed you to go talk to the supervisor. So Lisa is in our Neighborhood Livability Working Group, and her group is really working right now on bringing lighting into some of the communities that we serve, because although there's street lights, the lights are off. So, and then as well as there's a lot of cars speeding. So her group is working on trying to bring that awareness, although there are, places that they can go and talk to. I wanted Lisa to talk to the supervisor who was there to let her know what her group is working on. And Lisa, I told Lisa, I said, Lisa, he's there. This is your time. And I know Lisa was like, all right, here I go. Did her elevator speech. And then he actually came back to her and said, here's my card. My office would love to talk to you. But that would have never happened. When we met Lisa, Lisa would have said, Ivana, you got it. Tag me in. But I appreciate now that Lisa is now feeling more comfortable. But I think that's what a lot of community members need. All of them are rock stars. All of them are great leaders. And some of them just need to go through a training to understand their, their star power of what they can bring to the table. All of them, when they go through the training, we see them just really saying, oh yeah, I understand why we do this now. Or similarly to, now I know when I come here, what is my purpose? And that's really what we want from community members to understand, is that everyone can come to meetings, but everybody brings something to the table, and they just need to figure out, their gem, what they bring in, as well as highlight that their lived experience is as important as the titles that are sitting with them. So that's why I think having a training with you facilitate really does help them, and it really empowers them to highlight their needs.
Thanks, Ivana. And I think, if you really want to have inclusive community building, inclusive processes, people need to feel comfortable speaking up. You have to create the conditions and the environment for people to speak up. It's not enough to just ask a question. You have to prepare the table, as Yolanda was saying, and as Alicia was saying, but you also have to support the community members, to support them, like how to speak up sometimes, and also how to be able to kind of use their voice for what they need, and really listen. And especially this for people that are in power. Like, if you're really opening for feedback and you're really asking for opinion, and people say something, then listen. You can't say, oh, what you said doesn't quite fit what I was hoping to do, so therefore I can't do that, right? So we have to be really mindful about how do we ask for feedback, and then be really mindful about how we listen. Now, at this point, Nate, because you were the one facilitating, actually doing the training themselves, I would love maybe to kind of, if you give the audience some of the specifics, like what did this training look like, over how long was it, and what did you see in before and after as well?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I'll emphasize is just that all of this happened over the course of really 6 training sessions. And we did 2 cohorts, one in English and one in Spanish. And it included a mix of the fundamentals of facilitation, including active listening, meeting design. But I think, like we've heard from Lisa and Yolanda, for me, the much more important and impactful piece was really just demystifying these spaces and meetings that really needed Lisa's voice, that weren't working as well because Lisa wasn't there sharing her expertise. We were really missing a key expertise. And so really demystifying, here's what this meeting is about. When you hear these words about system change and these big multi-syllable words, here's what we're actually talking about. Here's what that looks like in the community. This isn't anything, this doesn't have to be anything too intimidating. And so as I'm listening to all of this, it's just really reminding me that I think keeping humanity at the center of processes is a muscle. And we have it developed to certain degrees in certain communities and certain branches of certain governments. But it's something we have to work on. The training that I gave in those 6 sessions to community members was building their confidence and their capacity as facilitators. But I've given basically that exact same curriculum to a group of county folks in Nevada County, California, with the exact same training arc, the exact same slides, really. And so I think just thinking of that capacity as systems strengthening throughout has been really, really great to see. And I think it's really inspiring to me to hear Lisa share her experience and Yolanda, the impact that the 2 of you are having. I think we're seeing direct impact from your participation and you sharing your expertise and your voices.
Thank you. Let's go to Yolanda and then Alicia.
Yes, I want to make sure I also do some framing around how this actually really, really began. Is in the middle of a pandemic. Like Friday, when everything is shutting down, I'm literally sitting on the same couch, realizing that my community is an hourly wage, community, and no work mean no pay. And I had a couple of allies reach out to me and say, what do you need? And I started just using allyship as a way to say, well, can you bring food? And we started with like 25 people just standing outside of my door. And at the time, one of the things that I also want to make sure that we talk about is that even in a community, we are not community until someone gives us permission to be. So in our community, we are very siloed. There, the African Americans here, the West Africans here, the East Africans here, the Latino community here. But during this and with this collaborative, we have been able to bring people, and Google Translate has, like Lisa was saying, Google Translate has helped break down some barriers. And I remember receiving food that was very American food, very canned. And when you are engaging people from relationship, they're willing to tell you. So they came and was like, Miss Yolanda, we don't eat out of cans. Where is the fresh food? And so I started telling the allies, hey, can you go and buy fresh food? And because they were like, what is this? It was ravioli. They were like, we don't eat this, right? And so bringing things that were not really addressing the needs, but also giving them space. Because of that, community members started leading the mobile food distribution, because it also got up to be like 200 people. And it was very unmanageable. And that goes back to the compensation. So I went and said, we need to pay them. They're running a food distribution for over 200 people in rain, sleet, snow. It was freezing cold. I had to go buy heaters. And so, but community members kept showing up. And they didn't just keep showing up because of the food. They kept showing up because of the community that they were building, and resources were starting to be shared. And so during the pandemic, when many people couldn't figure out, especially the county, how to engage people, these food distributions were the perfect space to come and engage 200 people. We did COVID testing, we did COVID vaccinations, we did surveys on road development that's coming up. We did community assessments with our healthcare system here, Inova. I mean, we were able to really get community voice to start. And so because of that, we have 6 locations. We created these natural leaders, these leaders who attended the facilitation, because we also saw people calling them saying, hey, can you do this? And they didn't have the tools to say, no, you can't do it that way. Wait a minute, I need to know more. And we didn't want these natural leaders to not be out there without support, tools, resources, and a coach, which Nate became. Like, you need a coach. You can't run a game. You can't run plays. And the other team has all of the coaches and has all of the resources. And here we are, a team that just kind of came together. We were like the Bad News Bears. We were just coming together because we enjoyed community, and the county and other stakeholders had massive amount of resources. And so I as a leader, I was like, wait a minute, I can't set my people up like this. We got to give them the same tools, the same resources. And so I advocated, hey, what are you all? You doing root cause analysis? Can we get that over here with our community? So that became a really wonderful relationship with the county, to where we started doing joint trainings. And that really helped the table to feel more comfortable when they started doing the working groups, because you have been growing together.
Thanks, Yolanda. Beautifully said. Alicia, did you want to add or either respond to Yolanda or Nate?
Yeah, I just want to echo just the importance of cultural humility. And Yolanda kind of illustrated that beautifully in the example that she gave around, sometimes as government officials, we see the need and we give them what we think they should get instead of giving them what they actually need and what is kind of more that will enable them to thrive, right? And the only way to do that is to build relationship and to respect and understand that, they can have some autonomy in making the choices that are right for them and their families and their communities. And that sometimes our role has to adjust. And sometimes we have to be the supporters. And, sometimes we are the funders as well. But that doesn't mean that we should pull all of the strings in terms of kind of the resources that we feel that they are deserving of. And so in that example, Yolanda, I think it was a beautiful illustration of cultural humility and how with relationship, you can truly honor that. I want to echo Nate's comments too around the joint facilitation. I feel when we were preparing, one of the questions Andreas asked us is kind of, how did you get involved with this? And I was honest, and my government folks can relate. I was voluntold, right? Like a project came up and they were like, you're the deputy director and, this is your next thing on your plate of many things. And so I think my background honestly helped me kind of jump into this feet first. I was a child protective services social worker almost 20 years ago. That was the beginning of my career. And so I came from a place of being trained through my social work background of how to work with families, how to engage families, how to allow families to make choices for themselves. And only if necessary, do we implement kind of the laws and the enforcement of the courts and things like that, only when we're unable to work with families. So kind of as an administrator now, I'm also an attorney as well. So like kind of in my comprehensive background, I have that experience of kind of working with people and trying to get them to outcomes that they need to kind of, feel included in the process. And so I just challenge my government partners out there that if you don't have, kind of a specific person that you can dedicate to this position, which we don't have a specific person. We have a number of people within various departments that are dedicated to the various work groups that are part of this work. Tap people who have the skills to work with the community, who might already be in the communities, who might already have those relationships. We understand that many of us are in the same ocean, but we have different sized boats. Some of us are on life rafts, some of us are on yachts, some of us are, on Carnival cruise ships. I don't know who those folks are, but, must be nice. But I think that, kind of no matter what your resources are, don't feel like you have to start big, right? Like you can start small with some of the relationships, resources that are already out there. And so, I think about, Nate, you said you kind of sent the curriculum to a county agency. I would venture to say that there are already people in that agency that could hit the ground running in terms of, the relationship building and the community building. And I think as someone has highlighted, it can be a real challenge to find the community people to be part of the process. But if you leverage what you already have, it's a start, and know that you have to build, and sometimes slowly and sometimes painfully. But I think persistence is really what you're looking for and not perfection.
Yes, and I also feel that there's some methodology that many of you perhaps have heard of called asset-based community development, ABCD, and if not, I highly recommend it. But it starts with what are the assets in the community? What are the relationships, the resources that already exist there, and what can we do with that? So it's not a deficit model, but rather a strengths model, right? And I think what you're describing, Alicia, in many ways, what we saw in Yolanda, like the natural leadership of the resources in the community, like how do we say yes and to that? How do we support and build on that? Now, this, of course, can be quite challenging because I think in many ways it challenges what we're used to in a command and control style of leadership, right? That's the way that things were used to be run. And in general, that's how people think sometimes of leadership and these activities. You say something and things happen. But in a VUCA world, VUCA standing for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, is about engaging and aligning, right? The world is moving too fast. How many of us had strategic plans for 5 years in 2020, in the beginning of 2020? And then the pandemic comes and like, oh, we got to throw that out the window. So we have to be able to be much more nimble and agile. And that requires a shift in mindset where facilitation, again, is a key. And that skill set is going to allow us to create more inclusive environments in the community. Now, I know as I'm saying this, perhaps some of you are like, oh, that doesn't sound too comfortable. And that's okay. But I think this is kind of our invitation saying that it is possible, but as Alicia said, it can be slow and painful. And some of you, I know this firsthand, of course. So at this one, actually, I would love to open the floor for your comments, your questions, questions that you may have about us, but also what resonates, what doesn't. I mean, this is a story. You don't have to agree with it. You can have reactions. I really would love to open up for your reactions, your comments and questions. And because some of you, I mean, some of us were meeting for the first time, if you could also just name, ideally, I believe where you're located, which state and organization, that will be very helpful for all of us. I'm gonna go off.
As people get active, get ready to, because it always is the most, I could take these 30 seconds to just say, as a community member, I also want this mindset shift is crucial, because when we are invited to the table, we show up as community. We don't show up with the politically correct statements already generated. We show up in our trauma. We show up in our frustration. We show up in our distrust. And I have often been misunderstood as aggressive or whatever is wrong word for my passion and my commitment and my desire to see change in my community has sometimes been misperceived. Because if you tell me to come talk to you and share, and I tell you and you reject it, you are going to see me respond in a way that I've always responded. So I want to make sure that as we're talking about having to facilitate that dialogue, is making sure that you go in with the right mindset. And so, Joe, I see Joe's hand up.
Joe, please.
Joe Riddle with Pinellas County, Florida. It is the west coast of Tampa. I got a couple of questions. Ms. Yolanda, thank you for all your passion and everything that you bring, and it brings back some memories from some of my early childhood, or not childhood, but my early in my career of being in a neighborhood that sounds just like yours. And it really put a lot of passion in my heart some 30 years ago now. But what size of the community are we talking about that you're talking here?
We are definitely Alicia will probably has like the county got the data. I will tell you that we are in a very dense populated neighborhood, in which, like my neighborhood right here, there's probably easily, I know there's 1,700 townhome units that probably house anywhere between 5 to 10 people per unit. And then there is a trailer home nearby, a mobile home that houses another, what is it, like 2,000 mobile homes. And then there's another one that has another 200. We are densely populated. So it is probably easily about, I don't know, 10,000 of us in this one little area.
Alicia, do you happen to have the specific data?
Yeah, so I can tell you, so Fairfax County is the largest, well, actually it's the most populated. We're not geographically the largest, we're the most populated county in Virginia. So we sit just outside of Washington, DC. We are in the DC metro area. So we probably should have prefaced this knowing that we have folks around the country who are joining us. And while the area feels, second nature to us, folks might not know. So we are essentially the DC suburbs or the outskirts of Washington, DC. So in Fairfax County, there are over 1 million residents. And we're a large county geographically. We're just not the largest within the state, but we are the most populous. And a lot of what happens in Fairfax County kind of drives the economic conditions of the state as well, just because of our proximity to Washington, DC, and many kind of Fortune 500 companies as well. So I think Fairfax enjoys kind of this resource-rich environment. However, there is a subset of Fairfax County that does not share the same benefit. And so Yolanda is referencing the Route 1 corridor, which is kind of like a highway, a stretch of highway that has a long history around racial segregation and inequity. And unfortunately, a lot of those impacts are still permeating throughout the community. So I don't know the exact number of residents along the Route 1 corridor, but it is a densely populated, maybe about 4-mile stretch of a mixed variety of apartments, mobile homes, and it's a huge community, a hugely diverse community in terms of representation. And I think someone alluded to that. Thanks, Yolanda. I was Googling while you were talking, but you beat me to it. So 6,000 in the census tract in a particular zip code, and then 7,000 in another zip code. So about 13,000 in altogether, but densely populated in a very small area. And, the outcomes for these residents are more adverse than those of the rest of the county. And so when we think about things like life expectancy, the life expectancy is significantly shorter for individuals living along the Route 1 corridor than it is for the rest of the county who, has access to quality healthcare and amenities that can contribute to quality of life. So comparatively speaking to the entire population of Fairfax County, there is research, there is data, there is evidence that supports that this particular stretch of our county is more likely to have adverse childhood adverse childhood experiences and outcomes associated with that are also kind of permeating into adulthood as well. So a lot of the resources and partnerships that we are engaging in now are focused on the Route 1 corridor to try to improve outcomes to that particular community.
If I could
And
just
they answered my second part of the question there. Have you moved this to other groups in your community? And I see that we're working with 5 different groups to bring those skills to them as well.
And Joe, I would add that actually, because of this experience, actually Fairfax County approached us again to expand, and we're in the process of talking right now about expanding to other parts of Fairfax County to do something similar as well. And again, this is a framework and model that part of the reason we're so passionate about this, because we see that this is something that could be done in other places, tapping into local people, local leaders, and really kind of doing small tweaks, small adjustments to support that. And I think that's something that excites us, which is, how can we make small adjustments for large impact? And it takes a village, it takes coalitions of government, community leaders, nonprofits, the private sector. And I think that's what we're trying to really, in which, again, the collective impact framework is kind of what has been holding this, if you will. And that's a framework that actually we believe is quite powerful. But that framework only works if you have skilled facilitation. Right? It only works if you're able to think about intentionally, how am I bringing people together? How am I thinking about preparing the table and actually bring people to the table and what happens afterwards? And having I would say, the long vision and consistency of partners like local government to say, and philanthropy and private sector, like, this is going to take time. We're not going to undo all this injustice that's been here for decades or centuries over a 5-year initiative. And of course, this presents challenges with government changing, et cetera. But this is part of the messiness of it all.
And I would also add that we are working with 5 neighborhoods. Again, these are 5 different neighborhoods, but these neighborhoods are the neighborhoods where we know that children have free and reduced lunch. These are single parent homes. These are homes where we know that there are leaders in there. And one of the things that I know Yolanda has done when she has come in is starting with Community Plus, is really highlighting and letting the community know that they are leading this. It's not the county, it's not other nonprofits, it's community leading, and understanding that they have the power to create change. So even with, I know that Andres, you highlighted that this is going to be replicated. We know that this can be replicated because we know that when community feels like they have the power to create change, they will make the change. Within Community Plus, one of the things that we have done is also created 5 working groups, because we know that community members, not everyone is going to want to change everything. People have specific expertise in areas they want to do so. So within those 5 working groups, we have people who are passionate about that specific topic. And that's why I think for us, it's been working very well to have community members be the lead and also highlighting things that people wouldn't typically know. A great example I can give is for Alicia, for her group, for children and youth, one of the things that community members have highlighted in the beginning was, we have an overdose problem with teens, with youth. what is the county doing? What are we? And then that was something that people have said that, oh, we didn't know that was an issue until you guys are having, like, this is very common, but that's because community members, like, they're living there, they're the experts, and they know what they want to do. And that's why for having facilitation training, it's important to give them that power so they can use their voice.
And I would just add, because facilitation training, what it does is, from our perspective at least, is about leading from the back. As facilitators, we can't be in the front telling people what to do all the time, right? We need to think about how do we create the environment for things, for people's voices to be heard, right? And yes, I can speak up if I feel I'm going to add to it, but you're always thinking about the group, the community, the larger picture, not just me and myself. And I think that's also a shift in mindset. I mean, because essentially what we're talking about is just looking at, like, it's a shift in mindset, which is often really hard to do. And it's not a one-time thing. It's like a muscle that we have to kind of continuously develop and practice. And to Yolanda's point, you got to have coaches. You got to have strength coaches to support you. And you know you're going to not do it. You're going to go back to your habits. That's okay. But then you have a coach or an environment where that's the learning, and you can continue to develop.
One of the things that I've always led with, that I want to make sure we don't walk away from this, is that we have to understand these are lives. And the reason why I started always with this human-centered approach is because when I came to this table, remember, I am a community member. So as I'm learning this stuff, it is traumatizing me, because when I am starting to lead this initiative, I find out data that I'm not privy to. So when I hear that on my side of the highway versus on the absolute direct side of the highway is an 8-year difference, I'm thinking my son and his friends that live on this side are going to bury their parents 8 years before their fellow students, their fellow classmates. That's ridiculous. And I'm going to hold the county and everyone accountable to save my life and save the lives of others in my community, so that my children don't have to go to school. And they feel that death, that 8-year death, happens when they show up without certain resources and their friends do. That death starts happening when they show up to get in the free and reduced line, and their friends are getting Uber Eats delivered to them. That death starts happening when they can't afford to pay for the activities, and so they're not on sports teams. That is the slow, painful death that marginalized communities feel when counties don't step up and create these type of initiatives to address the inequities. I literally, since working on this, have buried 2 of my neighbors, friends of mine whose children are on the basketball team with my son. I've buried 2 Black African-American parents because of hypertension and blood clots. They didn't die from a gun. They die from lack of access to healthcare. So when I say that I show up with passion, it's because I have had to attend deaths. And I have had to attend funerals that did not have to happen.
Thanks for sharing that, Yolanda. And you're making me think that as we invite community members in to co-create these genuine spaces, another element that I want to mention before we close is that we've really, I think, we talk about the facilitation capacity, but I think it's a facilitative leadership style. It's like a way of moving through the world. And we've intentionally created spaces for county folks to stay engaged. What Yolanda just shared is tough. That's a hard reality to sit with. And so we have an allyship meeting that we hold once a month for people to just come together, as well as a county meeting that Alicia attends every month. And it's really just for the county co-chairs to come together and connect the dots and support each other. How are you feeling on this? Because it's really, it has to be a shared experience. So we need to create the spaces for everybody to be able to access that genuinely and safely.
Thank you, Nate. And this, as we're coming to an end of the top of the hour, what I was hoping we could do is maybe we could just go around the panel, the group that came together, I was hoping I had asked each of you to think about like what's kind of, because we shared a lot of different things, and I'm sure people take different things, and that's perfectly okay. But I wanted to maybe say, like, what's the one-liner? What's the one thing that you would like to kind of give as a gift to the participants today as a takeaway, or just an invitation? So we'd love to maybe go around popcorn style from the panel. What are some things?
I can start. For me, one thing I will tell everyone is patience is key. You know, doing this work, collective impact, working with community members, it's all about patience. Things will happen, but it won't happen fast. But, you know, take the small wins and ride with it, because that's really the motivation that you need. And when things go bad, just learn from it. People make mistakes. And that's one thing that we say when we talk about doing a human-centered approach, is that let's be honest about the mistakes that we do. Everyone is human. We can make mistakes, but we're learning together. And, you know, when we do work in collective impact, it's going to take time. But when it does work, it works well and it works efficiently.
Thank you, Ivana. Alicia?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. And I think I said it before, just partners share power, and partnership builds trust. And trust is just vital to this work. And it does not happen, you know, kind of administratively in your office, right? Like, you have to spend time with families, you have to spend time with community members, you have to understand their experiences, not just on a theoretical level, but sometimes you have to walk the system with them to understand what their challenges are. There's been times where I've had to be a consumer for family members and various reasons of the system. And it is through those experiences that you learn what they encounter, how difficult it can be, and how sharing some of that power and really listening in a meaningful and impactful way, and honoring their experience as experts of their own circumstances, can help you really create that transformative change that we all want in our communities. But that partnership has to happen at that personalized level. And you have to, as an agency, be willing to give up and share some of that power in order to create equitable and meaningful partnership.
And so we have 30 seconds left for the panel. Just a one-liner, if you could.
Okay. Facilitation is not teaching. You can't teach me how to be human. And I am not a checkbox. Do not checkbox your community. Relate to them as human beings. You don't have to teach me how to be a human being. Create the space for me to show up.
Keeping people at the center is a muscle.
Thank you. And Lisa, what's your one-liner? You're on mute, my friend.
Put it
Well,
in
Lisa,
the chat.
yeah, put it in the chat if you want. And what? So what?
For all the facilitators have taught us, I just love it. Doesn't matter if you live in a mansion, a small house, a tiny house, you still are in a community that we all can grow together and make things better together.
Thank you, Lisa. And with that, I'll turn over to Laura for some last minute closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you once again, everyone, for being here, and especially to all of our panelists. And we're very excited to see an even bigger picture of all of this next month when we're in Salt Lake. And I know a few of our panelists, in addition to Andres, will be with us out there too. So thank you, Nate, Lisa, Ivana, Alicia, Andres, and Yolanda. And like I said, this has all been recorded, so we'll all be able to check it out again afterwards. And please, our presenters, put your information in the chat. We'll be sharing it out afterwards as well. And thank you once again.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.